Hello and welcome back. Today you're going to learn a relatively simple and quick little technique called forming. We are going to form a bracelet, hammer a piece of metal over a bracelet mandrel to create a form that will fit onto your wrist as a cuff. Safety-wise, wear goggles because it's always a good idea in a studio environment. And the only other thing you need to be concerned about safety-wise is those little fingies. We'll talk more about that once we get there. So, enjoy.
Let's get started. There's just a couple basic things that you need to form a bracelet. So this bracelet has been formed into a cuff. It's got kind of an open C shape to it, and it has a spring. So when I push in these directions, it bounces back to its shape. I don't have to pull it back. You want nice spring to your bracelet. To get started, you need a bracelet that has been soldered, etched if you're doing etching, filed completely, and sanded to 600. Now, of course, I'm not going to sand the etching to 600, but the back of the bracelet is sanded. All of the edges are sanded. It's basically ready to go to the buff. Once you have that, then you need to gather a bracelet mandrel and a mallet. We're going to use just a wooden mallet. A rubber mallet would work as well. I've got two types of mandrels at school. One is a stepped mandrel and one is a graduated mandrel. So this step mandrel I could use with this bracelet because it fits within one step. My bracelet with the moon, if I put the moon on there, you can see that the bottom of the moon hangs over this lip. So I wouldn't want to use this mandrel. I'm going to use this one. We're going to take our mandrel, set it into the mandrel stand. I'm going to take the bracelet, and the first thing I'm going to do is try to turn these corners slowly. What I don't want to do is take the bracelet, wrench that corner really tightly, because if there's any weak points in my soldering, especially on these long pieces, they're going to want to pop off. So I'm going to have the flat top side of my mandrel facing up as opposed to the skinny sides of the mandrel. So flat top side facing up. And I'm going to take my mallet and I'm just going to slowly feed this to the right. And I'm going to tap that down as I go.
Notice that I'm moving from left to right and slowly moving my bracelet towards the center.
I'm going to do the same to my left side. I'm right-handed, so I've turned my body and I'm now behind the mandrel.
Again, I'm starting by curling the very end of the bracelet and moving towards that center piece. Take your time, work it slow.
My moon is a little bit heavier, so you can hear me and see me hitting that a little bit with a little bit more force.
The heavier the gauge of the metal, or the more layers of metal you have, the harder you're going to need to hit.
And if you look, I've kind of made a bit of a rainbow shape to my piece. So I've really started this bend pretty nicely here. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to put that bracelet back at the top. This is my center point. I'm going to work on these turns and I'm going to start to hammer a little bit harder at this point.
Continue to work towards the center of the bracelet, slowly turning and trying to get the basic shape of the bracelet correct.
Then the nice thing about our mandrels at school is they turn. They're on a swivel, so they lift in and out of this holder here. You can purchase these at Rio Grande if it's something you're looking for. So I'm just going to turn and I'm going to work on my corners and the back side. I want to make sure I'm keeping my bracelet straight on this mandrel. It's starting to turn a little bit, so I need to be careful here. I'm holding on the back side as I hammer on the top side.
The biggest mistake my students make is being afraid of the hammer and not hitting hard enough.
And I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to check and make sure that I'm centered, and I'm also going to check and make sure that I'm square. And if you look here, this end is lifting up, so I'm going to just use my hands, kind of push that back into its space.
You'll see me do this often in making this bracelet. I check for the shape, I check for the spring, and I modify as needed.
I'm just using my hands to try to get it in the basic spot it needs to be. Then I'm going to put it back on my mandrel, and I'm going to work on that shape a little bit more, try to get it straightened up. And then I'm going to start to hammer really hard, which will make the metal more springy. So I'm going to keep working on this slowly.
At this point, you're really shaping the bracelet. You're finessing it. You need to hammer with some force. Do not be afraid of this. You want to do multiple overlapping hammer blows in a line all the way down the bracelet. Pay attention to spaces that are thicker with metal or have kinks.
That's looking a lot nicer. Still a little funky right here. So I'm going to put it on the mandrel and I'm going to work on this edge. You see there's like a little lift right here.
As I said before, check often, look for those little kinks, and then fix them as you find them. Great craftsmen pay attention to small details.
All right, I've got a pretty nice smooth shape. There's a little wrinkle in the line right here, but I've got a pretty nice smooth shape at this point. It's even with the opening centered from the center of the bracelet. It's got actually a pretty good spring, but at this point what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit it pretty hard and try to make sure it's got a really nice solid spring to it. And then at that point I can polish and do any patinas or finishing methods on this that I need to finalize this piece. So I've got the shape where I need it. Now I'm just going to make sure that it's nice and solid.
This is where you get your anger out. Don't be afraid to hit hard. The more we hammer the metal, the stiffer the metal gets. That gives its springy nature. If we hammer too much, however, we can cause the metal to become brittle and it will eventually crack and break. So there's a happy medium here. Get a nice solid spring to it and then stop.
Yeah, that's got a really nice spring. It's popping back into place nicely. We've got good form. Nice and smooth. I'll just do one little final hammering to get it nice and smooth, and then I'm going to take it over, polish it up, and I'll show it to you when it's finished.
Here's the finished piece, all buffed up and with a little oxidation to bring out that texture. I'm really happy with the outcome of this lovely little bracelet.